Hey, it's me, MLB. Here is part 7 of Blood Rampage. Enjoy. When you woke up later, it was around lunchtime, and you were going to go and look for him, but then figured it would be harder since he liked to come out at night mostly. So you bade your time and waited impatiently until it was closer to sundown. Then you took the bus back to his usual haunt. The streets were extra quiet that night, same with the alleyways. It was colder than usual too, so that could have explained why no one was out walking around. Aimlessly you wandered the main streets, and then started delving into the back alleys. Most sane people wouldn't have been doing what you were doing, but you were so set on your quest that if you died while trying to fulfill it, then that was okay with you, you guessed. You would have happily died doing what you loved. For over an hour you wandered around, until a hooded figure stepped out from an alleyway ahead of you and turned to walk up the street. You knew Eijirou's height and body measurements by now, and this person fit the bill pretty well, so you sped up a little to keep up and see where they were going. They walked to a corner store at the end of the street and entered, so you did the same, keeping behind the shelves and watching them through the gaps. At one point they turned towards the shelf that you were behind, and you saw their face clearly. It was Eijirou, and he looked a little forlorn. His eyes were downcast, and you were so close that you could see the small scar over his right eye. You knew that scar had been there since his quirk first activated at age 4. He'd cut himself with his finger. It was on his medical records. He walked around the shop for a little bit, looking at different things and swishing his hand around in his pocket. You ducked your head a bit to see what it was that he was fiddling with in his pocket, and saw that he had a very small amount of coins in hand and was counting them as he sized up different food items. He's checking to see what he can buy with the little amount of money he has, you thought, watching as he sighed and moved around to the next aisle to see the items there. It got to the discount section, and he crouched down to rummage through the discount breads. He counted his coins again, and then nodded. It looked like that he had enough for some bread. "Hey, you there!" the shop attendant called, and you and Eijirou froze in your respective places. "I know you're trying to shoplift. I've already called the police," the man shouted, staying well behind his protective counter just in case Eijirou went for him. Blood Rampage stood up and faced the guy with a threatening scowl on his face. "I know how long it takes for the police to get here, and I know how quickly I can move," he called the man's bluff. "I can deal with you and be gone in a second." The guy paled and stepped back, grabbing for something nearby to use as a weapon as Rampage stalked towards him. Don't!" you suddenly shouted, stepping out from behind the shelf that had hidden you. "You weren't going to shoplift. You were counting the money that you had. It's a misunderstanding, sir," you called to the guy behind the counter. Quickly you grabbed the bag of bread that Rampage had been looking at and ran to the counter, then handed your own money over to pay for it. The guy accepted your payment, and then you turned and faced Rampage, who was still stunned to see you there. "Quick, let's go." You grabbed his arm and ran from the store, pulling him behind you. "You can't be around here. You can't be around me," he called to you, but you weren't letting him go now. You had almost lost him a few times now, but fate kept bringing you back together. You weren't going to leave this time, until you'd had a good talk to him. "Where can we talk in private?" you asked him as you continued to pull him along. "I'm not leaving until we've spoken properly." Rampage could tell that you were serious, so he didn't try and fight you this time. Deep down, he too wanted to talk to you and find out why you were so persistent in helping him. "Turn left up here," he said, and you followed his instructions till you ended up at the shed that he was using to sleep in. As you pulled up out the front door of the shed, he took the lead and led you around the side that crawled in through the rusted hole at the back. You followed him in and handed him the bag of bread as you settled down on the dirt floor together, sitting across from one another. "Eat," you said to him. "You're hungry." "Not that hungry," he lied. "Just eat," he said, gesturing to the bag. "How much money do you have?" He pushed his hand into his pocket and pulled the coins out and then dropped them into your hand. In the dim light from the floodlight that was hung outside the back of the shed, you could just make out that he had 55 cents. "That bag of bread was 95 cents, you said, wondering if maybe he was going to steal it. "Was it?" he asked, ripping his teeth into the bun that he had pulled out to devour. "Wait," you said softly, looking up at him. Do you know how to add up money?" He blushed and looked away, chewing on his bun. He didn't need to answer that question. You now already knew. And then it clicked. The reason why he had gotten into so much trouble in the shops was because they thought that he was loitering and stealing things from the shelves, when actually he didn't know if he had enough money for food and was trying to work out as he looked at different items. "Hey," he said softly, getting his attention. "I know this is going to sound weird, but I know all about you. I know what happened at the entrance exam. And I know you didn't kill her. The robot, I was pinned underneath," he stammered out. All these years, finally being able to give his side of the story. Woke up in the hospital and all of a sudden I was a criminal. I don't know what happened until I saw the news, but by then I'd already run and I'd been labelled a killer, he said, his eyes begging for you to believe him. If anyone was going to believe him, it would be you, right? You nodded and reached a hand out to touch his knee. It's okay, I know. You gave him a gentle smile. He pulled his knee away, slightly uncomfortable with your touch as he hadn't had any human affection in years. I know you haven't meant to hurt people. This isn't you. What would you know? He asked, sadly, like you were just saying it out of pity. I know that your dad went to jail, he said softly. I don't know if you knew that or not, because you'd run away by then, right? I heard, he said quietly. He would beat me daily. I know, he said softly, and I'm sorry, but I believe in you. Blood Rampage's cold, abandoned heart suddenly started to warm. You were being so genuine and kind. Why did you try and decide to find me? He asked. What were you doing looking for a villain? I know my reason sounds crazy when I told you the first time, but I'm being dead serious. I've always had a thing for villains. Well, I mean, can you blame Yin? Just look at the League of Villains. There's some pretty darn good-looking villains in that group. Anyway, my heart is full. This was such a nice chapter, but there's still more to go. Stay tuned for part 8 coming tomorrow.